Hi, everybody, and welcome to week 3, where we're going to continue part 2 of planning SDI. This is where we are going to talk about gathering and utilizing information to report on goals. Okay, the first thing we need to do to report on IEP goals and create IEP goals is pinpoint difficult moments to create actionable results. We need our IEP to be a living document that is constantly getting actionable results, revising, and changing. An IEP is a living document. When a goal is mastered, a new goal will emerge. Or maybe when a goal is not being mastered, more remedial goals will be put in. So our first thing, we need to find the difficult moments. We need to pinpoint these moments to actually achieve actionable results. Once we pinpoint difficult moments, then we can address IEP goals. So how do we do that? Every good teacher is a diagnostician who is constantly evaluating their own students and figuring out what is missing and what needs coaching. So the first thing we do is thorough questioning. Very early in the process, early in the school year, we ask questions. When we get a student with an IEP, we look back at their old IEP. What has been a challenge for a student when this lesson was taught in the past? This could be something mid-year where it's something you've done in the classroom, where you're saying what has happened in the past, or it could be in the PLAF or in the previous IEPs. If you look at page 61, there are a lot of different ways we can ask questions and get this information. So, what's been a challenge for this student? What might be the root cause of the difficulties? Are there foundational things that are missing? Last week we talked about setting target goals, and our goals are either foundational, they're either content driven, or they're cognitively complex. So are there foundational things missing? Are there prerequisite skills that are missing? What part of my lesson bogged a student down? What got them stuck? What accessibility concerns do we have? Is there anything that's blocking the student in terms of accessibility? Are there lesson components that require fine motor skills, visual processing, or sustained attention? What is the holdup? What is causing these students to miss their goals? What do you think in your lesson was confusing? The best thing is when you have when you have two classes. In my second class, I'm always correcting on things I did in my first class because I was like, oh, okay, that was confusing to them. I'm going to rephrase it in class 2. So always be reflective of yourself, and what do you think you could do to improve clarity? What data might tell us where our students are facing challenges? Is there ever a time we need intensive intervention from adults? And then what other questions does it raise? So we want to be constantly asking thorough questions, right? It'll help us set goals and forward. Another great tool is assessments, and formative assessments really don't do much in terms of helping a student get to a goal. Really, they're just data collection. They show us where the barriers are, but they're not showing us how to move forward. There are a lot of assessments that do help us move forward and accomplish a goal, or at least a target. Um, Simple tally marks, classwork, exit tickets. That's something I've been doing with my IEP students all the time, because not every lesson hits every goal. Sometimes there'll be a lesson and it won't touch on these IEP goals, right? Maybe it's building up to something else, or it's a piece of foundational info. But I can use my exit tickets to really target the student's IEP goals. It takes a little bit of work and a lot of planning, but once you plan it, it's an infrastructure that you will have set. It'll be in your teacher toolbox for life. So exit tickets are a great way for little tiny assessments for those goals. If you have an inclusion class of 19 kids, you could have 19 different exit tickets, or you could just have different exit tickets for your students with IEPs. Do something a little special just for them. All right, that's SDI. Right? After the assessments, what are you going to do with that data? We need to use the data to coach the students. An assessment alone is doing nothing. but you have to use that assessment properly. You have to use it to guide the goals, guide the coaching, and guide the IEP writing. Just like I mentioned last week, we're always asking, what are we doing that is special? What IEP goals are we working on? It takes a lot of work in the planning phase, but it is worth it. So once we do that, we choose the IEP goals that we address during the lesson. What am I working on? The special education teacher has a predetermined IEP goal for each student in the lesson when needed. Right? So these teachers, to an adult, to the students, maybe they don't know which teacher's which, and that's great. Like, I love getting rid of the stigma of special education. My students, uh, they know I'm there for them, but the general ed students also think I'm there for them because I'm always helping. But if an adult administrator or a parent came into that room to see what the special educator is doing, we should be doing things that stand out. We should be supporting students in very special, specific ways. So we need to think as special education teachers, how am I going to slip this goal in here? Even if the general ed teacher has planned a lesson that has nothing to do with your IEP goal, you need to find a way, whether it be an exit ticket or a tally or just a little post-it check-in. There's a lot of ways to do it, but you need to come up with some way to figure out how to target that goal for the day. When we're creating goals and targets, we're using Bloom's taxonomy, a review from last week. IEP goals have a unique basis that's tailored to the individual student. The entire team needs to be on board, and academic goals should be linked to grade level. This stuff is review. This is just basics in terms of writing IEP goals. Here are 5 rules for writing IEP goals and closing the achievement gap. We're succinct. We're making sure it is a very specific, targeted, short goal that doesn't ramble on, that isn't confusing, that any teacher can look at and work with. You're writing about the expected skill and behavior, not the process. We don't need to know how you're going to get there. We just need to know where you want to end up. The focus on student needs will be in the PLAF, the present level of achievement and functional performance. This is where you're going to talk about what accommodations you've been using, if you've been using any modifications, how behavior, how mood, things like that, how they affect the student and could be barriers for learning. So this is where we write our narrative about student needs. Okay. We add details for the audience, which is the parent and the IEP team. We add details about the target behaviors and what we want to achieve, how things are going to be measured, the degree, the proficiency, the timeline. So this is where we need to have a percentage or a ratio of trials. We need to know when these goals will be achieved. Will they be achieved by the end of the school year? Will they be achieved by the end of the IEP? Will they be achieved by the end of the marking period, which isn't as common? Usually it's by the end of this IEP or by the end of this grade level. IEPs are written once a year, right? They can't go longer than 1 year without being renewed. And again, all goals must be grade level standards with rigorous expectations. We do not dumb things down. We do not lower standards for special education students. Our objectives to those goals may be more remedial, but our goals are grade level. Again, how we get there, that depends. Now, when we have a student, we need to be good planners to make sure our goals are getting met. And this takes a lot of work at the start of it, but once you get this down, it really makes our lives easier and it makes us more accountable in our IEP meetings. It makes us less likely to get in trouble for not following the IEP. Okay. This is a matrix. If you look at page, let's see, it's 65 to 68. You could see some examples of planning matrices. So you'll just be able to kind of check off what you've done this week. It's an easy way to make sure your goals are being addressed. Okay. It also highlights when accommodations and other staff are needed, like related services, like maybe OT, PT, speech, things like that. So a planning matrix is very important to have. It also helps us track goals across subjects. On page 69, there's great stuff for goals at a glance. Now, this is, if we're mostly talking about inclusion in here, right? So oftentimes we'll have 10 students. We'll have a class of 20 something kids, 10 students with IEPs. This is kind of crazy sometimes, and it's really hard to track and keep in order. So having this table, this goals at a glance table, really puts us in a nice organized place. The goal is readily available for lesson planning. Only goals that are related to that curriculum are in there. You could have an additional column for accommodations, and then you could find commonalities between students. There's probably a goal that several students are going to be working on in some form or another. So if you look at page 69 in our book, the ones I posted on here are good too. They're simple, succinct goals. It's a little blurry. Sorry about that. Down here is a blank template, which is a really good one too. Again, teachers pay teachers. I'm not telling you to buy anything, but there's so much good stuff on there. On page 69, there's just a very simple table, right? It has 36, 8 students, little succinct goals for each student. It's really easy to track. So every day you should have this in front of you. Say, okay, with Terrence, we're working on the planner. He needs to do his planner every day, right? He has a real organization problem, barrier, not problem. So you can use these things to kind of reflect on what you are doing for your students and make sure you're organized so you know you're meeting these goals. Okay. Right. After, you're reflecting here. Are there students with similar goals? Are there goals that haven't been addressed and need to be addressed? Is this the only time we can address these goals this week? When can I squeeze this in? Right? How can we utilize the co-teachers in order to meet these goals? So this is really something we need while we're planning. All right. So this week, you are going to recall a lesson that you've taught or observed recently. What IEP goals were embedded into the lesson? What IEP goals could have been embedded into the lesson? Maybe you observed a lesson that didn't have any. Now you could say your suggestions. What would you put in? What kind of information would you need to gather and make this effective? Um, so basically, we're looking at a lesson we've taught, we've observed. We're talking about how we could have planned for goals, how we could have monitored progress of those goals, how we could have coached those goals, where could we have put more in, where were they if they did exist in the lesson. So you're basically just taking a lesson and you're analyzing it for inclusion. As always, APA formatting, make sure you answer all of these questions, all 3 of the questions. Use evidence to back it up. Our textbook is loaded with stuff I cited in this presentation. Use those pages I mentioned, and make sure you reference the book, of course. Our assignment this week, using a student with disabilities in your current class, develop a planning matrix. So it's page 67 to 69, table 6.2. It prioritizes information to be used in planning long and short-term goals. You're going to use the planning matrix example in your book and in this lecture. You're going to create one for a student. And then you need a reflection, which probably should be about a page, to talk about how the planning matrix went. How was it difficult for you to do? Did it make sense? Is it missing something? you know, I want you to reflect on it. Has this been something you've done before in your class? Would this help you in your own class? So just analyze it, think deeply about it. As always, make sure you have a reference page and a citation. All right. Best of luck in week 3. I will be working on grading week 2 um, over the next 2 days. So as always, if you need anything from me, email me on Outlook. You can also set up a Zoom if you need to have a little one-on-one time for office hours. If you're ever confused, please reach out. I'm quick to get back to you. I'm here to support you. So best of luck this week. Thanks. Have a good time.